solutions for with fuel cell electric propulsion, but for a foreseeable time, the use of biomethane, especially liquefied biomethane for long-haul transportation, is absolutely crucial, and the best way and cost-efficient way to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. And what I would like to point out, today we have many participants from Italy, but if you take a look at Europe, and I'm representing many European companies, we have partially pretty high percentages of biomethane already in the gas grid. And even my home country, slow Germany, in this case, has meanwhile 50% biomethane in the grid. Sweden above 90%, Denmark 100%. So but unfortunately not in southern European countries. There's much to do, and there's many available in many biomethane and raw materials available. And when I tell you I'm talking about biomethane, I mean biomethane produced from waste and from manure, because then we can go below zero. And with 40% of biomethane for the transportation sector, we are already fit for 55. So this is my message for you today. This is what we are discussing in Brussels, and I can only recommend to get in touch with all politicians, also from Italy, that have represented or are representing Italy in Brussels, that this is a topic they should stress over there, because the legislation process is right now ongoing. Okay, thank you for your for listening to me, and I would like to hand over to the moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson, for sticking to the time allotted to you. Based upon the agenda now, the floor goes to Andrea Arza, the president of Asso Gas Liquidi, the Italian Industry Association. Thank you, Diego, and good evening to all of you. First of all, I'd like to thank Maria Rosa for organizing this meeting and for giving a say to the. I'd like to quite obviously thank Mr. Fidanza, who also through a collaboration with the European Association and with the Federchimica has been able, according to us, to represent at best the needs of the Italian gas industry. Having said that, I think I should stress first and foremost a couple of things. First, the calculus method. I've listened carefully the speech by the General Secretary of NGV Europe, and I can only agree with many of the things he pointed out. So my invitation is that we should continue to work together so that we have a different way of calculating emissions. And considering that the topic of emissions is a global topic, the calculation that we do, considering the time-to-wheel technology, quite obviously takes account of a process that is very partial, not the whole process. So for us, the focus should be shifted, first of all, to the life cycle assessment, LCA. And this is fundamental, because without this, we don't reward the efforts that the entire gas industry and all of the players who depend upon the gas industry, such as is the case of the transportation sector, hopefully. I mean, all of the efforts that we make to make so more sustainable our activity, and I'm referring in particular to the production and distribution of biofuels. Biomethane was appropriately mentioned, by the way. But I say it again, we have to properly reconsider the LCA, because otherwise all of these efforts run the risk of being useless. and not be rewarded in the reckoning by the European Union of emissions. So this is an area of intervention that is absolutely necessary, and through the reconfirmation of the DAFI, we should revise the calculation of the emissions. And this will bring undoubted benefits for all the gas industry. And this is well deserved for the social role of this industry, because do not forget that together with what is referred to by the directive as other alternative energies, for sure today we represent those that are most socially sustainable, and we cannot think of, making European policies without remembering that the technologies that we want to reward must, first of all, be affordable. So they must be affordable for most people, because otherwise we cannot reduce the emissions. And it's not just with the improvement of alternative technologies that only the rich can afford that we can achieve the ambitious goals of curbing the CO2 emissions. And I'd like to conclude my speech by also saying that it is necessary, in order for the naval sector players and the logistics in road transportation players and the entire OEM industry to continue to invest and make bold choices towards a diversification of fuels. It is necessary to have a framework. It is necessary to have a vision towards stability. Now then, the benefits introduced and the certainties introduced by DAFI, the directive, cannot be thrown away by changes that do not make it possible to have this perspective in the long term. Those who have to change their fleet, or those who have to upgrade their ships or ferries, well, these people need to have, a cost-effective time frame for making investments and have a return, because if the lawmakers continue to change under pressure of other interest groups, the legislation quite clearly, we lose all of that innovative and positive push coming from the courage of entrepreneurs in the individual countries. And this means benefits. So this is the view which I believe should be a priority for all of those who will represent the interests of industry in Europe. Thank you, and I wish all the best. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Uncertainty is the number one enemy for entrepreneurs. Dimitru Bexenescu, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good evening, and very nice talking to you today. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Maria Rosa, so much. I'm the pioneer in Romania of implementing CNG. So we built the first station in Romania, and now we are building the first network of stations in Romania. There are so many difficulties, and I would say that particularly in Eastern European countries, to come to the zero emissions from renewable energy, it's a very interesting target, but let's see how close or how far we are. In Romania, for instance, there is a big incentive from the government for those that will buy new electric cars. And these incentives means a big pressure on the budget, and no matter where the money comes from, will always be a limited affordable budget to do so. And in fact, the development of electrical cars, electrical vehicles, is not that big. In principle, we are talking about how fast we want to go to reducing the emissions, CO2 emissions, and what we should do. And for instance, in Eastern European countries, I assume that with a budget that they will it will go to electric car, 10,000 euros, for instance, in Romania. This budget can be splitted, for instance, to be given for 10 or 12 or 15 CNG cars, and it's an emission, it's CO2 emission, but in principle, those cars that will run on CNG will have 2, 3, 4 times lower emissions than the car that are running on diesel or gasoline at this moment. So the idea is that I don't think going strictly directly to zero emissions, I mean electrical or hydrogen, especially in Eastern European countries that are poorer countries that people cannot afford to go immediately to electric cars. This makes the mission very difficult. And as you probably know, Romania is one of the countries where the emissions are extremely high. And if we don't do something very fast, we cannot go to the target that we assume. And more than that, we have another idea that, for instance, the CNG cars that run on, even if it's a fossil, CNG is a fossil fuel. But those cars that are running on fossil fuel tomorrow or after tomorrow can run on biomethane very fast. And we have a very big potential of agricultural residues that we can use or municipal waste. And we can go very fast to a biomethane that will have a very, very good and effective impact on the environment. So in conclusion, my idea is that yes, we want zero emissions. Yes, we want zero emissions from renewable energy, but how close or how far we are from that moment and what we are doing in the meantime. We are just waiting this to happen, because in this rhythm that we have to go to electric cars or to hydrogen cars in countries like Romania, it will take many tens of years. And this is not feasible. And what is feasible is to save the CO2 emissions faster. And people that are running on CNG cars are very happy, mostly in the countries where the income, the general income is not that high. They are very sensitive to the cost of fuel. And then I think this will be very easy implemented if we do it in a right and proper way. So my conclusion is that we cannot go to hydrogen and zero emissions from hydrogen or electrical so fast. So we need to put something in place at this moment to replace the conventional fuels. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. What you had to say was very interesting, especially when you were mentioning about the waste collection services. In fact, a few days ago, an Italian company that collects waste in the city of Turin and in the hinterland of Turin, after the statement of the CEO, after trying different electric vehicles, then they passed to the GNL with the idea of using the bio-LGN. In fact, even in Piacenza, there is a company, a garbage collection company, that is producing biomethane with the waste, and they are going to refill all the tanks of the garbage collection trucks of the city. So thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to Stefano Cannone. Thank you, Diego, and thank you all. And now I will leave you the floor. Introduce yourself by yourself. So I represent Altranoil. It's a German company that stemmed in the fossil fuel gas stations, and in Germany it developed its own network of LNG or LGN stations, and they are dealing not only with the design and construction, but also with the supply with through another subsidiary in order to cut down the emissions in transportation in general. What is really characterizing us and differentiate us from other direct competitors on a German level is the approach that we are having with the bio LGN, and what is going to be in 2000 and soon 2020 or after is the a biofuel that will allow us to use waste, solid waste or urban waste in general, within the supply circle, and therefore create a true circularity of the processes. And so to cut down the CO2 emissions by 100% starting from 2023. This is going to be thanks to a product that we called refuel, that is always one of the, it is part of it is made by the Altranoil company, and on a German market. The market is a little bit behind as to the Italian market, but there are some true forerunners that are managing the sustainable transition in Germany. So thank you very much. And thank you also for being so brief. It is true that Germany, as to Italy, as to filling stations, is a little bit behind, but we do know that in Germany, when they do things, they do them quickly. And so I am sure that the progression of the last 2 years as to the gas stations in Germany, despite the COVID pandemic, was absolutely interesting, despite the fact that you see on imports and on the rivers. And now we'll give the floor to Jane and Jaime Scatal.
Good evening, can you hear me? Yes, very well. I'm Jaime Suriel, Technical Director of the Group. First of all, thank you all for having me here. Most especially thank you, Maria Rosa. Hi, Maria Rosa. And thank you for allowing me to represent Spain. And I will tell you about my experience on the world of methane mobility. Our company is present in Spain, Italy, France, and South America. And in 2000, we pushed heavy trucks with liquid methane motorization. So at the beginning, we started to import trucks from the USA when they were just not present in Europe. We made liquid methane surface stations in 2002, the first in Europe, and we pushed towards an alternative gas oil cleaner fuel in terms of particulate, NOx, and CO2. Today, we have built, yesterday, 100 facilities across Europe. So 25% or 1/4 of liquid methane. So we know very well what it means to push a sector against a big lobby like that of gas oil. And now we're also facing difficulties in pushing our sector, which we believe is very clean, against the electric and hydrogen. We have put in place several projects to have biomethane, and here in Italy now we're developing with Caviro a biomethane facility, largest in Europe, 27 tons a day of liquid biomethane, and with this biomethane we will supply our customers. And in Spain we also have biomethane facilities, but gaseous ones. We believe that biomethane is the only way of becoming clean users of natural gas. And the directive should take account of this for the upcoming revision. So like Mr. Azza said, biomethane should be reckoned across the cycle in terms of emissions, because methane is a primary source of energy and its effect is also positive. The supply points are anywhere. So there's a network of service stations. So we don't have to invest on this, because every time you create a hydrogen facility or an electricity facility, you have to spend CO2 to make it. So we have a network of service stations. We have the technology, including biomethane technology, and biomethane is safe, much safer than hydrogen. And it encourages the local economy. So farmers, small truck drivers, and all of the companies that transport everything to the digesters. So this means richness or wealth for the local economy. So it's an excellent solution for transition, and this technology is already available, as was said by earlier speakers. So what I wanted to say is that in Italy, Germany, and France, there are incentives from the government, and in Spain, we don't have it, not yet. This is the only thing that we are pushing for in Spain in order to try and develop biomethane. This is my view, my contribution. Looking forward to meeting you in person to discuss. Your Italian is great. You're so good. Thank you, Maria Rosa. And has pushed so strongly in view of the biomethane terrestrial transportation in Italy. Okay, having come thus far, we've already talked a bit about biomethane and bio LNG and how much it can do for decarbonization. So now we will listen to Susanna Pflüger, Secretary General of the European Biomass Association. Over to you. Here she is. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good evening, buonasera. Sorry that I cannot speak Italian, so I need to stick to the English. But many thanks to NTV Italy and also our host, MEP Fidanza, for inviting me to speak here tonight. So yeah, my name is Susanna Pflüger. I've been working for the European Biogas Association, so briefly EBA, since 9 years, being made in charge of our policy and advocacy work. And I have really seen great improvement during these 9 years when it comes to the acknowledgement of biogas and biomethane in Brussels. So nowadays we have actually these nice roundtable discussions focused on biomethane, which would have been basically impossible back in 2012 when I joined EBA. So EBA is the voice of biogas and biomethane in Brussels, representing the whole value chain of biogas and biomethane production, having more than 150 members all around Europe. And this includes producers, plant manufacturers, grid operators, traders, investors, and also final users of biogas and biomethane. And we promote all uses of biomethane, but of course we see particularly its value in the transport sector, complementing electricity and contributing to local circular economies, as well as more global use in the shipping sector as a sustainable shipping fuel. The benefits of biomethane production are already nicely acknowledged by the European Commission. So for example, when it comes to the methane emissions reduction and so on, but we are worried about the consumption side. So the current policies like the CO2 standards for light-duty vehicles, and also now the discussions about revision of the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive, having once again more focus only on so-called zero emissions technologies. These are very worrying us, but at the same time, we see positive development in several countries at the national level. Traditionally, of course, Italy is a very strong country here, and also the Nordic countries. But nowadays also, for example, we just heard about Spain, and I think Spain is also has recently acknowledged biomethane as a zero emission mobility fuel, and also Norway did the same. To equally promote biomethane together with hydrogen and electricity, And this is, of course, very, very good news as biomethane can even reach carbon negative emissions. So it is important that the EU does not water down the good practices of national level, as not all countries are willing to put all eggs in one e-mobility basket, as the Commission is suggesting. Biomethane is really probably the most sustainable fuel that you can get, and so many recent studies also indicate that its production can be significantly scaled up by 2030 and 2050. But of course, for that, we need supportive and stable policies in place. So I hope that we will have tonight a good discussion on how the EU's transport policy would need to evolve into a more technology neutral direction in order to reach the EU's ambitious climate targets. And I hope, of course, that the European Parliament will support us in this project and help achieving greenhouse gas emission savings finally also in the transport sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing this out. Andrea Steger. He is also active in IGU, which is the main association of the European gas sector. Across the world,
we are actually starting to use biomethane on one side and other sources on the other. This is not only to use at best what is existing, and an important element was remembered by many colleagues before me, but also to continue innovating, because let's not forget that today the positioning or the possibility of having infrastructures and all the investments made these days are truly resulting from the innovations that we had on a European level. So just to give you an idea of about how this sector can benefit additionally the European industries in general, I would say in the last LNG report of IGU that was published the other day, it road transport, NGL or LG on a global level increased by 200%. Whereas the maritime use more than 100%. The CNG, which is a market that has been developed a lot in the past few years, in the last 10 years, grew by 66%. And so this means something from my point of view, which is, first of all, we cannot neglect this option in among the decarbonization options and zero emissions. Many years ago, when I started dealing with these topics in the greening the gas grid, as we used to say at the time, the true idea was to attack emissions right away. We need to have a target in 2030 and one in 2050, but we do not have the luxury to wait. So I believe that it is important to act on several sides. I mean, in order to actually, resolve the 98% of the problem, we cannot afford choosing, one way rather than another. So actually, selecting one approach rather than another, well, could have some implications that perhaps we are not fully able to assess in terms of supply of raw materials and so on and so forth. So this is a very important element to, it's important to be able to develop a sort of a full supply chain from the fossil fuel, well, to other things that can actually reach consumer in an efficient way. In Europe, we have about 2 million, 2 million kilometers of transportation networks. And also, technological neutrality, as Mr. Fidanza was saying at the beginning, is one of the must, not only in terms of a philosophical approach, but also because we don't have a single solution. And thinking to focus only on heavy or truck transportation of or cars is not enough. Also, we need to make sure that the market can enhance at best all the bio components through crediting system, guaranteed origin, and so on and so forth, that allow truly to have a fluid use and approach to the market. Let's not forget that biomethane is a renewable source. It's in embryonic stage. It is supported in different countries, but we need to make sure that it will be possible for biomethane to develop on the market without subsidies. So we have been working a lot on that. Last but not least, just a couple of comments. Biomethane and a recovery plan. Italy for sure made a huge effort in order to include biomethane as part of the recovery plan. We have 1.9 million euros for the production of biomethane. We believe that this is definitely one element we need to focus on, and it will be able to, help even transportation in general. And so the supply chain has to move together. I think there are all the conditions. The last thing that I would like to leave you with is the national context is something that has to be taken into account. You cannot forget to be all this. I mean, you cannot, think that we're all the same. I am not tall. I don't have curly hair. So, I'm myself. So we need to avoid considering that some countries that perhaps have a limited number of inhabitants or deep pockets where they can draw money from in order to have electric vehicles, I mean, can be a benchmark that perhaps other countries should strive for. So we need to allow lots of flexibility to the member states in order to pursue the best way to decarbonize themselves. So thank you very much. Thank you to for all the things you said. I mean, perhaps it would be lovely to go back to some of your of the information you mentioned in other sessions, but also it is not possible to pass on to some energies quickly. But perhaps we could say that before the hydrogen, we could use biomethane that protects the existing infrastructures and takes away pollution from the environment. So I believe that the directive can definitely play a role. And then another thing that you just mentioned, besides the different electric production capacity, well, biomethane is widespread everywhere besides the state incentives. It's a regulated, correct system of or certificates of origin become absolutely necessary. In Italy, we are developing the bio-LGN in Italy, sorry, in Germany, a bit less, but they will get there. And then the important networks are going to be unified with a single operator, and all the different members part of it. But Carlo, if we still have a few more minutes, there is something I wanted to highlight that Mr. Anderson said. At one point, it is as if Europe closed one eye about something. Well, about 1.5 year ago, if you remember well, we were speaking about natural gas in order to help countries that had coal power stations to shut them down. All of a sudden, the whole world turned around and went upside down. So I wonder, there is a direct link to the use of natural gas and the development of natural gas such as biomethane and so on and so forth, which is closely linked. So how can Europe, all of a sudden close an eye on something? I mean, you cannot have decarbonization in 2030. The goals of 2030 are absolutely um, stringent, and so we need to shut down coal power stations immediately and with great care. And I don't know, Carlo, I'd like to know what you think about it. I didn't understand whether you were talking to me. Sorry, there was a problem with the connection. Um, as you know, I had an experience here in Brussels with the break of 5 years in between. And I actually had a shift so that when we approved the original directive, um, essentially, although there were some, issues and quite a certain hostility as to the GNC, well, as to methane in general, people used to have quite a positive approach, to such an extent that besides some differences on some targets and a sort of a direct dialogue with some member states, like Andrea was saying, I mean, there were different approaches and flexible approaches in the light of the national situations, uh, something that the Council of Europe is always very careful about. And and so we actually, we thought that they were they were willing to listen. And then I came back after 5 years and I realized that things have changed as to the gas, I mean, market. They seem to be a bit more hostile, unlike they used to be in 2014. And in the meantime, we were able to see with the different speakers that the market went forward, important investments were made, and despite the regulatory framework, there were solutions that were deployed and by the different operators. And they really showed that gas is absolutely essential for transition. And so I fully agree with your perplexity, and I would just like to contextualize all this issue, because since I missed here for 5 years, when I came back, I thought that they took a step backward. So, with increasingly stringent goals as to the reduction of emissions, the the I mean, the gas transition was left aside. So I believe instead that we need to start from that. We need to accompany the market that is evolving and investing, as we heard tonight, but without truly avoiding any possibilities, and actually with no ideological approaches, but proceeding with a pragmatic approach and market choices. And so this is the contribution that we'll try to give with the other colleagues in the next few months, when we'll be able to discuss the issue. So, I would like to thank you all, and perhaps Maria Rosa will probably make the conclusions. She'll wrap up. And so for us, this dialogue that we started today is going to be essential in the next few months, when we actually will perform different tests. This is only a first step in order to share views about an underlying scenario. And then, as we often do with many of you, we'll work together on the different files, because then that's where, we are really playing, I mean, a big match. And so let's keep in touch, because there is going to be a lot of work ahead of us. And so I am done. And then, Maria Rosa will give final conclusions. Um, so these clarifications are very important. If you have any comment, we can actually have a short comment, otherwise, from each one of you. Otherwise, I have questions. I see the opportunity, as Carlo was saying, even in political terms, because there could be a special interest in Eastern Europe to use methane or natural gas much more than what they were able to do so far. In Italy, we have an island, Sardinia, that is quite a large island, that started, constructing the methane network with LGN. And so, it avoided to have the construction of a big gas duct. And I don't know, Beck Minescu, I don't know whether you have something to say about that. I don't know if you think that, you know, in your country, in Eastern European country, what could we do in order to increase the use of methane gas in Eastern European country? And this is something I'm asking all the colleagues, whether this could be a solution.
Yeah. Well, it's not that much that should be done, but to convince the authorities, to convince the politicians that the only way to go to carbon neutrality should pass the transition. So we cannot avoid the transition. And now in Eastern European countries, we have so many arguments that we can show them, and this is what we are doing. Actually, we are trying to convince them that we have such a big potential. For instance, let's say, let's talk about Romania. In Romania, as you probably know, we have the biggest resources of gas in Central Eastern European countries, and one of the most resources of gas in Europe. More than that, we have our agriculture is very, very well developed, and the potential here is huge. But still, at this moment, we are one of the most polluted countries. And this is something that politicians want to do, but they don't know how. And this is what we are trying to explain them, that we have the solutions in our hands. And as I said before, for instance, now, we have a situation where they want to show, the politicians want to show that they care, and they want to find solutions to fight pollution, but they don't do it in the right way. They, for instance, to convince a Romanian to buy an electric car, you should come with a very, very substantial subsidy, and this is happening now. So the subsidy for an electric car is 10,000 euros. And you don't solve too many problems with that, because those that will buy an electric car at this moment in Romania are not those that will run many kilometers on the streets in Romania. So in fact, you don't actually save the environment with this subsidy. And what we are trying to explain and to promote is that with this money, with the same budget, you can switch. You can convince people to switch from conventional fuels to gas. So CNG, and of course in the next period to come to biogas. And the advantages are so easy to be seen, but we face this problem with the mentality, because I think the electrical and hydrogen are so well marketed, and people are looking to go on that way where the marketing is bigger. And now what is happening is that we actually I'm not pessimistic, I'm still optimistic. So we have a good potential.
Of course, it's all about marketing. That's out of discussion. But it's equally true that, for example, at least in Italy, the development in methane for heavy-duty trucks and the like has been strongly pushed by the marketing of large-scale food retailers that pushed in order to have more environmentally friendly transportation, so that they can say that on top of high-quality products, they have high-quality logistics. Okay, we are running short of time, unfortunately. Anderson would like to say something. Okay, Jens, please go ahead.
Oh yes. Thank you, Maria Rosa, to give me the floor. I would like to make a short comment to give you a better understanding. You know that I'm from the vehicle industry. I have nearly 30 years experience there. And we have to take into account what the strategy is of all car manufacturers. Europe, and especially the German car manufacturers, regard themselves as the leaders of the industry. And they are under threat by companies like Tesla, but also by Chinese companies active on battery electric vehicles. And in combination with the legislation in Europe, taking only tailpipe emissions into account, Europe tries to keep the European car industry competitive on a global scale. So, and everything that, what only counts in the industry is economies of scales. So, and this is why the industry tries to accelerate the transition process to bring the cost down. So, on the second position is then the environmental protection. And this is where we have to argue with the European Commission, because in order to save also the planet, we have to make use also of alternative fuels like biomethane. And this makes it necessary that we establish a crediting scheme so that the OEMs have an attractive opportunity to offer still CNG vehicles, because otherwise we will lose them. And I think this is really important to understand, and this is what we are right now doing in Brussels. I hope this clarifies it a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Anderson. So having come thus far, the floor goes to Maria Rosa Baroni, the president. I'd like to say goodbye and thank you for your patience. I think we may have more opportunities to discuss these topics, including in our international conference from the 6th to the 8th of October in Bologna, Italy, where for sure the evolution of DAFI will be at the center of our discussions. Maria Rosa, over to you. First of all, I'd like to thank all of these friends for getting together around this important table for the life of methane and biomethane. I would like to ask Julie, Robert, and Carlo what they think of the fact that we, NGV Italy, at the beginning of July, will establish a new international association called World Global Gas Mobility, at the request of our members and of our companies. But not only that, all of the continents are asking this. And to establish this association that we wanted so much, we talked to Latin America and Japan and China and India and Russia, and they're all convinced that in their countries the ecological transition with methane will certainly be more long drawn out than what Europe expects, including because, you know, their economy size is different. And quite obviously, they don't want anything to be imposed upon them by Europe. So I would like to ask those who are in Brussels how they see this difference, because I don't believe that CO2 is something on top of Europe. I really mean it. So I'd like to ask how Europe sees this part of the world that is huge and that is surrounding Europe and that will follow its way for a long time. We should be very, very quick, Maria Rosa, because otherwise the debate would be longer. And I'm seeing that some colleagues have left. You know, we have to intervene in several meetings, and we also have the plenary meeting. Well, for sure, this is a big topic because, you know, in Europe, we have an important task in defining more and more ambitious targets. It's not a mystery for you. My political group here at the parliament is more realistic and pragmatic because considering the increasing targets and considering that we are the only ones in the world to set more and more stringent targets, we try and be with our feet on the ground, which doesn't mean that we don't want to be more competitive because this can go hand in hand with ecological transition, but we want to do that following the dynamics of the market and trying to be drivers without, however, imposing choices which cannot be reached in practice. Like, for example, so that you can understand the approach of my political group. I mean, in Italy, these days, they're discussing about the transposition of the guidelines of the European Directive on plastics. And when the directive was to be voted, everybody was enthusiastic because we were all environmentalists. We didn't want plastics. But then when it comes to implementing the directive, we find that thousands of Italian companies risk severe damage because of the wrong interpretation of the directive. So we're all pragmatic and everybody says, okay, sustainability is good, but we should keep an eye on the impact on the economy. We said that since the beginning. We were insulted because they said we were not enough good environmentalists, but this is our approach. We want to always keep together sustainability for the environment and sustainability for the economy. And I believe that this is the challenge for Europe, without ideologism, but staying very close to companies, which for us are a very important chunk of our economy. They have to be supported. They shouldn't be kicked out of the market or damaged. This is our approach. We will try and pursue it in the upcoming future for the sector you operate in and that we are talking about tonight. Thank you, Carlo. Well, we are available for providing practical and technical information. Don't hesitate to reach out to us, and this applies to your colleagues from other political parties. And thank you, Diego, for chairing. Thank you, Diego. I'm not seeing him. He's with us. Is he with us? Yes. Okay, let's stop with, I'm saying I'm not seeing. Okay, thank you for inviting me. Goodbye. Goodbye to all of you.